Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new edition of the Mad Sports Show here on the Off the Mic Sports Network. I'm Mike Mayer here with my man Danny Udelf. The third member of our team, Andrew Marks, is unfortunately not with us. An unfortunate situation. His friend Michael passed away last week. He is en route to the funeral. So he is not able to be with us this week. It's a very unfortunate situation. Michael's a very young guy. I got to meet him at a WrestleMania last year. Really, like, he's the epitome of why we do this show. You hang with your friends, you talk sports, you bullshit, you have a great time. And when I hung with him at WrestleMania, I only knew him for 2 days. He loved John Cena. And it's just, you could see the energy coming out of him. So to see someone like him pass away at like our relatively around our age is really unfortunate. Thoughts and prayers go out to Andrew, go out to my friend Brandon Medina, who is a friend of the show here as well. I do a space with him based off wrestling. So thoughts and prayers to Andrew and to Brandon and to the family members of Michael. The show is in dedication to you. Michael loved John Cena. He loved LeBron. He loves the Cowboys. So, like I said, big reason why we do the shows for Michael. So thoughts and prayers to everyone out there in San Antonio for the funeral, including Andrew and Brandon. And we will do the show in memory of you. Not to really continue on this path of talking about unfortunate circumstances in death. But that's where I think we kind of have to start here, because in addition to losing people close to us in our personal lives, Danny, we lost two titans and two legends in the sports world earlier this week on Monday. There's Pete Rose and Dikembe Mutombo both passed away on Monday. Dikembe Mutombo, we know him very well, the nut in my house. But he was more than just, that and being like a meme and being in a Geico commercial and all these other things. Like, he was a global ambassador for the NBA, was played in the NBA for over a decade with the Denver Nuggets. The iconic image of him holding the ball after the Nuggets as an 8 seed upset the number 1 seed Seattle Sonics. I think this was in the early 90s. That's an image. He went to the finals with the Philadelphia 76ers and Allen Iverson in the early 2000s. Averaged a double-double in his career. I think he was let me have this here. He was an 8-time All-Star. This guy, he's in the Hall of Fame. It's really, unfortunate to see Dikembe pass away only at the age of 58 due to brain cancer. It's just, you hate to see somebody die that young. And just by all accounts, if you've heard anybody talk about Dikembe Mutombo, and I never knew him personally, neither did Danny, but he just sounds like a beautiful, beautiful person inside and out. And it's just you hate to see something like that happen. And thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Dikembe and the NBA family. We lost a true legend in Dikembe Mutombo. So, Danny, first let's do this on Dikembe. Your thoughts on this, because this really hit a lot of us hard, because not just because of the basketball player that he was, but because of the person that he was.
Yeah, I think you, me, and Andrew are all huge fans of Dikembe. He grew up playing while we were all kind of growing up on the NBA. We were all kind of in that same age range that he started playing in the '90s and went into the mid 2000s, and he was there for our entire childhood and up into our teenage and young adult lives. So it's really sad to see someone that you kind of grew up idolizing pass away. Always a really sad thing. Everything I've heard about him, nobody's ever said a bad thing about him. He's such a nice guy from what everyone says, and obviously, we never had a chance to meet him personally, but we just heard such great things about him. I have great memories of watching him play and doing the finger wag and blocking shots. I mean, just a one of a kind player. You really haven't seen a lot of players in NBA history that play that style. I mean, massive guy. It's easy for him to block shots, of course, but yeah, I think it was just very depressing, just kind of hearing that news. And that's one of those things. As we get older, unfortunately, more and more players from our era will start to pass away, and it's really sad anytime it happens. But just truly an absolute legend.
Yeah, no, he was an absolute legend. He was an absolute legend in the sports world. And like I said, it wasn't just about being a great basketball player and being predominantly just a big man who didn't really score, but he blocked shots. And like I said, that's where the not in my house thing came from. Predominantly being more of a defensive anchor in the middle. That's what really stood out to him. And like I said, you just think about all of the great things that he was able to do. in just 58 years of life. It's just like, and just to like, extend to like, hey, this happened early on in the day on Monday. And then near the end of the day, we find out that Pete Rose, um, very different circumstances, was much older in his 80s, passes away. And this one hit the sports world a lot harder, just because of like, the circumstances surrounding the fact that he's not in the Hall of Fame, because that has been a big talking point for multiple decades with multiple people who think that he should still be in on merit based on the fact that he leads the Major League Baseball all time in hits. He's the hit king. He's always been that way. Some crazy stats for you, by the way, on Pete Rose. 23 consecutive seasons with 100 hits.
Insane.
I mean that's nuts. Like that is insane. And like I get it, like that the circumstances of like he bet on baseball, he had to be banned. It's really a shame that we never were able to come to a resolution of getting him into the Hall of Fame on the merit of what he did during his playing career, because I always felt that he should have been in. I understand why he's not, because he kind of disgraced the game, but I'm always of the proponent of what you did in your respective field should be honored in a certain way. And, we could maybe put it up for debate with what happens with Barry Bonds, because he, used aid to get himself to where he is. But I just think it's really ridiculous. And I realize this as a wrestling fan. And I talked about this on my wrestling show after Monday Night Raw. They paid tribute to Pete Rose. And a little known fact about Pete Rose, he's in the WWE Hall of Fame, but he's not in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame.
Crazy.
That in itself is kind of ridiculous. So, Danny, like I said, this guy played. I mean, for God's sake, this guy played from 1963 all the way. He played all the way until 1986. Like this guy played 21 seasons in the or 20.
23.
23. I can't even count. 23. I'm looking at the numbers here, and it's like I'm losing track of it. But yeah, between the Reds and the Phillies, he played 23 seasons in Major League Baseball and had all these hits. And like I said, you had all those consecutive seasons with 100 hits. It's just he may not have been like everybody's cup of tea, like a Dikembe Mutombo, but it's just like to see a guy like that pass away, and then the circumstances of the fact that he's not in the Hall of Fame, that hits you a little bit differently. But it was a sad day on Monday.
Yeah, it's sad. I never got the chance to see P. Rose play because he retired a year before I was born. But everything that I've seen on highlights and everything I've heard from people who got to watch him play, he truly is the greatest hitter of all time, without a question. 4,200 hits in his career, all-time leader. The crazy thing that really sucks is that every player that's eligible for the Hall of Fame with over 3,000 hits that was not part of the steroid era is in the Hall of Fame except for Pete Rose. Like, other than steroid era players and Pete Rose, every player that's ever had 3,000 hits that is like a guaranteed Hall of Fame spot. He needs to be in the Hall of Fame. I've been saying it for years. You've been saying it for years. I don't, he never cheated baseball. All he did was bet on games. He never did anything to, fix the outcome of games or anything like that. I think it'd be a little bit of a different conversation if that was the case, but he never cheated the game. He just bet on games. And sports betting is one of the biggest things in the world right now.
Right.
Let's move on from it. Let's put him in the Hall of Fame. I wish it happened before he passed away, but now it's a little too late. But he still deserves to be there without question. What he did on the field is unmatched. I mean, he is the greatest hitter of all time. So he better be in the Hall of Fame soon.
Yeah, Rob Manfred. I know we don't like Rob Manfred and Bud Selig, who it's just like I never got it. It's in a lot of ways, I think this could be a weird tie. It's a lot like NIL. Because if you think about this, like guys like Reggie Bush and like all these other players who got in trouble for like taking impermissible benefits. Now NIL is this big thing in college sports. It's like Pete Rose bet on baseball. Like, guess what? I mean, I know Calvin Ridley got suspended for like a year in the NFL because he did some online betting. But listen, it's like I don't think that you should be restricted from going into the Hall of Fame when you are statistically, like you said, the greatest hitter in the history of baseball. And that record is probably never going to get broken, ever.
Never going to get touched.
It's never going to get touched. And the stat that you said is what jumps out to me. Every non-steroid era 3,000 hit member club is in the Hall of Fame right now. Every member. And that is just unfathomable that the guy at the top of that list is not in the Hall of Fame. Like that, like I understand the whole, he disgraced the game of baseball by betting on games. But at some point you've got to separate what was done on the field to what was done when he was a manager or when he was past his playing career. Because that's completely different. And like I said, we could have a different conversation when it comes to the steroid era people in terms of what they did on the field, because they had aid. But Pete Rose didn't have aid. He did that all by himself. He didn't use anything to cheat. He just bet on games. And for some people who have an issue with that, like I said, that did not impact his playing career. Okay? It was after his playing career. So I hope that Major League Baseball, I mean, it's going to look really disingenuous, whatever, because it's oh, he passed away. This should have happened at least a decade or so, because they paraded him out at All-Star games and stuff, it was, and honored him. I was like, well, you can do that, but you can't put him in the Hall of Fame? Come on.
Right.
That's,
he belongs.
He belongs. It's I think it's really unfortunate that we are having this conversation a couple days out or a day or two after he passed away, because I understand that he, in some people's eyes, he was kind of an asshole. I get it. I mean, it's just what if you're, but when you're a great player like that, you're kind of allowed to be that way. And it's some people have this perception in their mind because he bet on games that it somehow impacts his legacy. I was like, that doesn't affect what he did on the field. So, I'm glad that we line up on that, because I know that's been a very divisive topic in the space of Major League Baseball for a long time. But to have that conversation, especially after he passed away, I think it's really hard, because it's just normally when you have these passings, like I said, we just talked about Dikembe Mutombo. He's in the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So it's most of these people who pass away, God forbid that they don't pass away young and they don't get to reach these heights, but most of these legends that you see, they're in the Hall of Fame. And the fact that we're having this conversation and Pete Rose is not in the Hall of Fame, I think is ridiculous. Like I said, the fact that he's a WWE Hall of Famer because he appeared at a WrestleMania and he was a massive heel. I think he took a choke slam from Kane or something, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been it was something with Kane. I think he was the ring announcer for a match between Kane and The Undertaker.
Oh my God.
So the fact that he's in the WWE Hall of Fame and not the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, that's everything that you need to know. That's everything that you need to know how absurd this is. So Major League Baseball, do the right thing. Put this guy in the Hall of Fame. Rest in peace to both Pete Rose and Dikembe Mutombo. Our thoughts and prayers are obviously with the families and obviously the communities within baseball and basketball as well, because those were two mammoth losses in the sports world. All right, let's move on to some other more joyful topics or stuff here, because I know it was kind of a bad way to start off the show here, or kind of a little bit of a dark way, but like I said, when you have legends like that pass on, it's they deserve the respect. And it's
now we get to have fun.
Now we get to have some fun. Here's a very interesting story that came through early this week on Monday. So Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders, he did not play on Sunday against my Cleveland Browns. And by the way, boy, do I have some thoughts on that. We'll have that later on in the show. Boy, you don't want to miss that. But Davante Adams, some very interesting stuff. It has been reported by multiple media outlets that he is seeking a trade. It looks like that was put up on Instagram, and I guess Antonio Pearson might have liked it or something. It's a weird situation in Las Vegas, which makes the Browns losing to them all the more disheartening for somebody like me. But Davante Adams is in his early 30s. He's not exactly very young. He's got a very big cap hit. The Raiders made this big trade for him. So now the trade rumor's out there, and obviously this has not been a secret for it's been known for a while that Davante Adams, even though he wanted to be with the Raiders, that was his team growing up. It's been known that at least through the back channels that there's been a lot of murmurs about potentially reuniting with a certain quarterback in New York City, or in New Jersey where they play their games. A guy that he had the most success with in his entire career with, Aaron Rodgers. So naturally, that's where this thing's going to go, Danny. But your thoughts on where this thing lies with Davante Adams, because I feel especially knowing what happened with the Kansas City Chiefs and Rashee Rice now being out for the year, naturally that's going to come up. I don't see a hope in hell of Devontae Adams getting traded in division there, but this is going to spark a lot of discussions about other receivers, and we could talk about that. But specifically, your thoughts on Devontae Adams here?
Yeah, I mean, this is not fully surprising. His quarterback is Gardner Minshew. He's got an average quarterback. He's coming up on the twilight of his career. He's 31 years old, soon to be 32. He doesn't have a lot of time left in the NFL, and obviously, he probably wants to win a championship and have a productive season, everything like that. I feel like the Raiders are kind of hectic, as we know, and they've always been hectic. I think since we've been watching football,
Right.
but I feel like they're just kind of hectic again. I haven't had a chance to watch it, but from my understanding, Pat McAfee earlier today stated that maybe it's a mutual wanting him to get traded from the Raiders' perspective as well. So I don't know if that's true or not, but apparently the Raiders might want to trade him, and he wants to get traded. So it just seems like it's a marriage that's falling apart and quickly turning into a divorce. Do I want to see him play with Aaron Rodgers again in New York? Maybe. I don't. I definitely don't want to see him go to the Ravens. That's the first thing I thought of whenever I hear anyone on the trade block is going to go after this guy. Obviously, I'm still bitter that they have Derrick Henry as their running back and other players besides that. But I think there's going to be definitely a big market for him. He's a really fantastic receiver. The contract, like you said, his cap hit's a little bit high, but for the talent he has, for what he brings to the table, he's had I think 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and he is one of the elite premier receivers in the NFL. I'm sure there's going to be a good trade market for him, but it's a little bit of a weird situation. I don't know if we'll find out more, but I do kind of expect him to get traded after all of this because obviously blowing up publicly, I don't really see how the Raiders can try to salvage this and keep him.
Yeah, and it's really weird because I have a couple of friends who are big Raiders fans, and they've told me that Antonio Pierce, the only reason that he's really there is because of vibes. And he got hired pretty much off of vibes and like that he was getting along with Devontae, he was getting along with Max Crosby, and he kind of won over the locker room. And Antonio Pierce is not that great of a coach. He's
No,
not. He's not. He's not. He's not. I mean, he threw his team under the bus after they lost to the Panthers. Like he threw his team under the bus. It's like he's not a good coach. And
yeah,
and believe me, I have people in the industry who he is not a good dude. Like he was responsible for a lot of the shit that happened at Arizona State and took zero accountability. Got out of there, got a job as a linebackers coach, and really fell upward into this opportunity because Josh McDaniels couldn't hack it the second time in the NFL. So in regards to Devontae Adams, I don't know with that cap hit if the Raiders are going to be able to get what they want this year. Maybe they wait until the offseason. What makes this interesting is, like I said, the Chiefs need a receiver.
yeah,
They need a receiver. And I've heard, and if you've paid attention to my Browns, and we can talk about this a little bit later on, Amari Cooper just looks like he does not want to be in Cleveland.
yeah,
Because of the trade rumors surrounding Brandon Ayuk in the offseason. He was reportedly in that. Tyreek Hill is clearly not happy after what happened. I mean, the Dolphins just fell to 1-3 on Monday night. Tua Tagovailoa is at least out for another couple weeks. I don't even know if he should play the rest of the season after he had another concussion. So there's other receivers out there for the Chiefs potentially to go after because they're not getting Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is going to end up, like you said, with maybe like a Ravens, maybe like a Cowboys. Andrew, I think, was kind of sheepishly making a joke that Jerry would try to make a splash like that.
yeah,
Yeah, I think if he gets traded somewhere, especially during the season, I don't know if the Raiders are going to get what they want
right.
in terms of because, like I said, that it's like a $20 million cap hit. It's really hard to see somebody take that. And then obviously knowing that the Raiders really have no leverage here, they know he doesn't want to be there. They know and like other teams around the league know that the Raiders really don't want him anymore, so they're trying to get rid of him.
Yeah,
So it's one of those bizarre situations in the NFL, and it's like this looked good, and he still performed as a Raider, but it hasn't nearly been as pure as it was with the Jets and or not with the Jets with the Packers.
Packers.
I think I honestly think that there's a real opportunity here that the Jets actually do this, and it's not going to end well if he goes. Everybody wants him to go to the Jets. I'm here to tell you right now, if you thought the way that this week went for the New York Jets losing 10-9 to the Broncos and the Broncos having under 200 passing yards and Bo Nix, granted he did throw his first NFL touchdown in this game, but he only threw for like 60 yards. Like that is an embarrassing loss.
That
to have
is.
at home. And if you think Devonte Adams is going to solve all this other shit, like there's really deep-seated issues with Aaron Rodgers doesn't trust Robert Saleh, like Robert Saleh doesn't trust Aaron Rodgers. There's a lot more issues there that Devonte Adams is not going to come in there and fix that. So
Yeah.
Jets fans, you can root for all that, but I don't think it's going to end very well for you. It would be a very Jets move if they did that. So that's really the thought on Devonte Adams. Let's move on here in the NFL, Danny. So keeping our tabs, we had 5 undefeated teams coming into last week. We lost 3. The
Yep.
Vikings and Chiefs are the only teams that remain undefeated in the NFL for very different reasons. Although the Vikings, had an interesting game with the Green Bay Packers. They jump out to a huge lead. Sam Darnold's amazing again. The Packers come back and the Vikings only end up winning by 2 points. But still, Kevin O'Connell, we talked about he's the coach of the year in the NFL right now. And then the Chiefs, completely different situation. They're struggling and sort of getting by on, just being the Chiefs and kind of the way that the Patriots would find ways to win the games, kind of get through the cracks. They're 4-0 based off really good coaching, really solid quarterback play, even though Patrick Mahomes hasn't been by any means his extraordinary self through the season. But losing Rashee Rice now is a big deal. After losing Isaiah Pacheco, although it was nice to see my guy Kareem Hunt come back, dust off I mean, he wasn't wearing the old 27 that he used to wear when he was tearing it up for the Chiefs, but it was nice to see him back in a Chiefs uniform. Granted, I would have loved to have seen him in a Browns uniform again this year, considering the state of our running game there. But no, the Chiefs, they're getting it done, man. It's hard to explain, but these two stories right here at 4-0, man, one in each conference left at 4-0. So your thoughts on these 2 undefeated teams, and then we'll talk about the 3 that fell from the ranks of the unbeaten.
Yeah, I really like what the Vikings did. They did fall apart in the second half and allow the Packers to get back in. Sam Darnold had a brilliant first half, and then he kind of struggled in the second half. They struggled to get first downs and hold on to the ball. They were not playing much ball control in that second half at all. Packers really found their way back in. Thankfully, the Vikings were able to hold on. I'm kind of low-key rooting for the Vikings in the NFC at this point. I think I made that a little bit obvious last week when I gave Sam Darnold some love, but I like the way the Vikings are playing. I think their defense was really good overall. Again, there were some miscues in the second half, but I like the way the Vikings played. Chiefs look sluggish. Chiefs look like a team that we said it last week. They don't look like they care. They look like they're like, we're just going to get to the playoffs and then we'll start caring in the playoffs. But it's a weird start for the Chiefs, but the injuries are starting to pile up, and it doesn't really seem like they're headed for a Super Bowl right now. They just don't look like a contender, which is weird to say because they're undefeated, but they've been very close to not winning multiple games. And I don't know, I don't love the way the Chiefs are playing. I'm sure they'll get where they need to go, but they look like a really kind of lackluster undefeated team.
Yeah. It's like I said, the comparison that I made was the Warriors and the Cavs back in those days where they were running over the NBA, and it would be like the old flip the switch. And I remember the Cavs during a couple of those seasons would shut down for a game against Orlando in the middle of January and would lose by 20 points because they just didn't care. They just didn't care. And then it would come playoff time, they would just roll through the whole playoffs, get to the finals, and then we'd have what we expected. But there was some and you know how this is going to go, Danny. Everybody's just going to have that. What's wrong with the Chiefs? They're going to probably get destroyed in a game at some point down the road. They'll probably. I remember it was ironically against the Chiefs. I remember the Patriots on a Monday night get destroyed by the Chiefs. And this was, I think, with Alex Smith as the quarterback. And everybody's like, what's wrong with the Patriots? I just can see the headlines on sports newspapers and on debate shows across the world talking about the Chiefs are going to drop a game or two and they'll be like, what's wrong with the Chiefs? I was like, guys, are we really doing this? They're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. It sucks that Rashee Rice is gone for the season. Pacheco is going to come back this season. Travis Kelce finally showed up and finally actually had a decent game. I think he had 6 or 7 catches, and he had a good game against the Chargers this week. But yeah, they're getting by with their defense, which is a good thing. Chris Jones has been a monster this year. Chris Jones, honest to God, I think we almost forget how great of a player Chris Jones is when you're on a team with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Like it's really remarkable just how great and a dominant defensive player that guy is. And so that's really what they're getting by on is like their defense is playing their ass off, and then like the offense is just kind of sort of limping along, just sort of like hey, Patrick Mahomes is just like throw an interception here, we'll get it, we'll take care of it, it'll be fine. So, meanwhile, the Seahawks, Bills, and Danny Steelers dropped from the ranks of the undefeateds. So the Seahawks. It was a competitive game, actually a really solid game on Monday night against the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff went 18 for 18, had multiple touchdown passes, and he caught a touchdown pass from Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that was very cool. Seahawks, we kind of saw this coming that like, hey, they kind of beat teams that they were supposed to. This was a tough spot for them going to Detroit on a Monday night. It was a really tough spot for them. I mean, they did go to New England earlier in the year. That was their first road game, but that wasn't really. Let's face it, the Patriots aren't that good. That's a team that you should beat. And I mean, they beat what? They beat the Titans, and I think they beat the Dolphins, who were without Tua. So that was their first 3 wins. So I'm not surprised that the Seahawks fell here. In regards to the Bills, we should have seen that coming too. Even though I was trying to convince myself that the Ravens were in trouble, the Ravens are back. The Ravens just absolutely annihilated the Bills. This wasn't even competitive. Josh Allen had his worst game of the year. This is what happens when you go to Baltimore and the Ravens are firing on all cylinders in a night game in that environment. We know how it is, Danny, as AFC North fans of the Steelers and the Browns. That is a brutal, brutal place to play. And if the Ravens got their mojo back, like they lost their first game at home, weirdly to the Raiders, which is still confuses me. But the Bills, like I kind of like once they won that game against the Cowboys, I was like the Ravens are going to win this game. Yeah. I want to believe that Buffalo, but Buffalo, they had a short week. They were on they came off a Monday night, so it was just like it felt like the pieces in place. And then we'll go into this, and then I'll let you talk because this is really the piece that I know you really want to talk about is your Steelers. We talked about it here on the show. Then maybe the Steelers had a path to, potentially get to 6-0. And I cautioned you. I was like, I can see that, but I can also see a vintage Mike Tomlin special. This was kind of in the vein of that if you watch the first few minutes of this game or the first few quarters of this game. But I give credit to Justin Fields and I give credit to the Steelers team for not waving the white flag because that could have easily been a 2 to 3 touchdown loss that I've seen from Mike Tomlin teams countless times in the past. I've seen this game so many times. So I'm not surprised that the Steelers lost. What I am surprised about is the fact that this was a very competitive game to the very end. And I think for the first time this entire season, I saw an offense that can actually be functional for the Pittsburgh Steelers because Justin Fields looked about as good as he has looked maybe in his NFL career, in my opinion, because like he was awesome. He was really fucking good. He threw for over 300 yards, had a couple touchdowns running, had a touchdown throw. He was awesome in this game, Daddy. So you can take it wherever you want with those 3 teams. I know you'll probably want to start with the Steelers, but your thoughts on the 3 teams that are no longer undefeated in the NFL?
Yeah, I'll start with my Steelers. It was a disappointing game. They got off to a really rough start in the first half. Mike Tomlin, I've ranted about him for the last decade. This was your typical Tomlin trap game. Anthony Richardson got hurt in the first half, and they brought in grizzly old Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco just torched our defense for the majority of the rest of that game, as he's done many times in the past. It was really disappointing. The team just didn't really look very good in the first half. Tomlin had a horrendous challenge in the first half that he had no business challenging. Um, the Steelers never established a run game early on. Najee Harris was struggling. I think what really upset me the most about this game was that fourth quarter towards the end of the game, that last drive. The Steelers. I don't know if you watched this or not, but I was furious. The Steelers had a chance to get to the end zone potentially, get back in the game and tie it. Um, they had a second down play. Our new rookie center, Zach Frazier, botched a snap to Justin Fields. Fields was not looking, and thankfully he was able to recover it, but it was a pretty big loss of yards. The next play, Fields throws to Najee Harris to the sidelines, and Harris makes a boneheaded play, doesn't get out of bounds when he has a really good opportunity. Right, he's literally right on the out of bounds line, doesn't get out. And then Tomlin, being Tomlin, has one timeout left with like 40 something seconds left, doesn't call it, instead has Justin Fields rush to the line, rush the team to the line after these two botched plays, back to back botched plays. And instead of calling a timeout, easing them down and setting up a play on 4th and 10, he has them rush to the line, and it doesn't go well. Obviously, they end up getting a turnover on
Yeah.
downs. That to me is just poor coaching from Tomlin, and this is why I rag on him so much and have done so for the last decade plus. I just think when it comes down to these little decisions, he always seems to make the wrong one. And it's just infuriating. The Steelers made such a good comeback. They were down all game and they never gave up. Justin Fields got them back into it. The defense kind of stood on their heads late in the game. It was a good comeback effort, and it just fell short with just some boneheaded mistakes. But on 4th and 10, would they have gotten a first down if Tomlin called the timeout and got them in the huddle and eased them up? Who knows? We'll never know. But to me, you call that timeout. You don't, Tomlin takes a timeout home with him, and he has nothing to do with it. It's gone forever. So to me, that was a little bit of a botch. The Bills, I think we gave them the kiss of death last week because I think we both stated last week that they were the best team in the NFL so far, and Josh Allen maybe possibly a front runner for MVP, and they just threw up a stinker. So, not much to say about the Bills. It was, they lost to the Ravens, and we hate the Ravens, and it sucks. But and then the Seahawks, they played a solid game. They didn't do anything super bad or super wrong. They just ran into a Lions team that wanted to win, and it's kind of all there really is to it.
Yeah. That ends Steelers series. And listen, like I know this is a common thing, and Danny and you and I talk about it a lot when we text with each other off the air, and we talk about our teams and whatnot and how we feel. And like for the longest time, I was like, man, you guys are way too hard on Mike Tomlin. But specifically knowing the standard of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the fact that he won a Super Bowl so early, which I think might have been a good thing early on, but the fact that he's now in his 17th, 18th season in Pittsburgh, and we're now going on 6 or 7 years that they haven't won a playoff game. I mean, for God's sake, the Browns have won more. The Browns have won more playoff games in the last 6 or 7 years than you have, which is
Don't
which
remind
is
me.
which is an absurd thing to think about. Like that's just insane. It's great that you're getting these teams to the playoffs and you have this reputation of finishing above 500 and overachieving. But when you're the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and there's only what do you guys have only have four coaches, 3 or 4 coaches in the history of the franchise, right?
I mean, we've only had basically Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and
Yeah,
Mike Tomlin.
three. It's three head coaches in your history. Three,
Or in the last,
three,
well,
three.
Chuck, there were coaches before Chuck Noll, but not a lot of them. But
But
Chuck Noll started coaching in the '60s, so we're
but
talking about
since
three
the
coaches.
'60s, it's 3 coaches in 60 years, man. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So the standard that's there, after I would have said probably about 2020 after you guys lost to us, I was like, man, okay, this is especially when you started that season 11-0. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, that was where I was like, you're getting to the point of okay, you're getting by on reputation from early in your career, and it's a running joke with us. It's like I kind of saw this coming against the Colts. I obviously didn't think Joe Flacco was going to factor into this thing,
Don't
but
remind me.
which makes me more infuriated for a lot of other reasons because that was a conversation on the internet when Joe Flacco and Baker Mayfield both go crazy on Sunday. Meanwhile, the Browns quarterback situation is an abject disaster, but um, yeah, it's just if you're a Steelers fan, I totally understand why you want to move on and why that's been a conversation in fan circles for probably the last 5 or 6 years at least. For you, it's been going on for longer than that.
Oh yeah, I've been telling you for a decade.
You've been telling me since about 2014, man. It's just
Maybe before.
it's not surprising. So, Dave, real quickly, let's get to this. We're before we get to my Browns and then another neat little topic here at the end. Best story for you through the first month of the NFL season because we are now in October and we've been through 4 weeks. What's the best story in the NFL through the first month of the season for you?
Well, I know we had some discussions about this as to whether to pick an individual player or a team, and I know we've had some talks about good stories already. Obviously, the Damar Hamlin thing was a big one that we talked about a couple weeks ago, and the Sam Darnold thing is a great story. But I'm picking a different one. I'm going a different route today. I am picking a player. My player is Jordan Mason of the San Francisco 49ers. He is second in the league in rushing right now. He's already eclipsed his career high rushing totals. And he's already tied his career high best season with rushing touchdowns. He has 447 rushing yards. He has been a force on the ground so far, and he's a player that probably not a lot of people have ever heard of before in their lives. They're like, "Who's Jordan Mason?" But he's second in the
I'll tell
league
you,
right now.
fantasy people know who he is.
Fantasy
They
people know.
damn when the people who drafted Christian McCaffrey rushed to the waiver wire to get Jordan Mason. I'm telling you that right now.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he's been sensational, and I don't think anyone ever had Jordan Mason on their bingo card as second leading rusher in the NFL after a few weeks into the season. But he's killing for the Niners, and that's a big story, especially with all the injuries and stuff that's going on in San Francisco. And to get a running back kind of out of nowhere and have him absolutely blowing it out of the water, it's just incredible. So I think that's a really good story so far this season. I know we've got a lot of other really good stories and that we've mentioned, but I'm very impressed because he's not on anybody's radar, and here he is, second leading rusher in the NFL.
This is why I love you, man. Like you're hinting at something off the wall, like going for a running back on a 2-2 49ers team, which by all accounts to a lot of people would be kind of underachieving. But that's a good poll by you because like I'd been thinking about that for a minute because Christian McCaffrey, I don't know when he's coming back. And this is a testament to the player, but I also think it's a testament to that staff. And just like they could I swear to God, they could put Raheem Mostert in there. They I don't know what it is. It's not even just Kyle Shanahan. It's the Shanahan system. Like we went through this with the friggin' Denver Broncos. I remember guys like Mike Anderson and Olandis Gary, like these random ass people that I'd never heard of in my life after Terrell Davis. And it's like the Shanahan system, like Arian Foster with Gary Kubiak in Houston. Like this system just works. It works. Like, and Kevin Stefanski actually is a disciple of the system, and Nick Chubb has had some of his best years in the NFL. Like this system, which is Kubiak, Shanahan, whatever, Stefanski, however you want to do it, it works. And I know the 49ers are not perfect this year. They've been very injured. Deebo Samuel and George Kittle came back. They had a huge win over the Patriots this week. But yeah, shout out to Jordan Mason, man. Like that was. Like everybody kind of sheepishly was like, yeah, I'm going to go pick up Jordan Mason in my fantasy league because, hey, Christian McCaffrey was my number one pick and he's out for an extended period of time. But yeah, he's come out there, had a bunch of 100-yard games. Like he's consistently produced. And it's like I said, it's a reflection of him as a player, but it's also a reflection of just how well this organization in San Francisco is built and how good that system is under Kyle Shanahan. So that's a good poll by you. I really like that. I'm going to go with kind of the obvious one here. It's Jaden Daniels and the Commanders.
Yeah.
Like, it's Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. Like, they're three. If you would have told me 4 weeks into the season that the Washington Commanders, are at the top of the NFC East, the Browns are going there next week, and I am petrified to face this team. Jaden Daniels, like back-to-back weeks where he's barely thrown in a completion. Like this is unbelievable what this guy is doing. I knew this kid was really good and talented, but I always leaned Caleb Williams over Jaden Daniels in this debate of who goes one, who goes two. And I know a lot of people in the Washington area. I lived there for a year. This is as excited and as excitable as I've seen this fan base and that I've seen around this team, because that's just a walking joke, that franchise, for a long time. They because of the Daniel Snyder ownership and how they have new ownership, they have new management. Dan Quinn is doing an unbelievable. Like we've always thought Dan Quinn is a very good coach, but he always has that 28-3 hanging over his head for that Super Bowl when he was in Atlanta. But he's a good coach. He's a really good coach. And Cliff Kingsbury was one of the great assistant coach hires of the entire offseason because they've catered a whole offense to this guy. Austin Eckler's come in there. Brian Robinson's come. Terry McLaurin's doing great stuff. Like this team is really fucking good. And to be 3-1 with a rookie quarterback in that division with the Cowboys and the Eagles just being messes of themselves is really just like, and the Browns are going to go to Washington and probably get their asses kicked. And we'll get to the Browns here in a second because I have, like, especially after the last 2 weeks in games they should have won. Going to Washington the way that they're playing right now scares me to death. But to me, like respect to you, Danny, and I always appreciate you going off the wall. Like the obvious choice, and I had to take a cop out here. It's Jaden Daniels. Like the second pick in the draft being 3-1 through 4 weeks is just insane.
Oh, it is absolutely. Yeah, Jane Daniels is absolutely amazing. I love the guy. I'm a fan.
It's just like you can't stop him. He's throwing seeds all over the place, and like if you get him in the read option game, he can either hand it off to these good running backs, their line's playing really well, or he'll pull it and he'll beat you for like 30 yards on the ground. It's a hard thing to navigate. So okay, so that's the best stories of our NFL season so far. But I want to talk about this because like I do Browns thoughts here on the channel. I'm just Danny, you know me. I've been a miserable Browns fan for 25 years. I've been through 1-31. I've been through 0-16. I've been through 1-15. I've been through terrible season after. This is about as demoralized as I have been through 4 weeks in the season in a long, long time because the hype was there for this season, and it's a combination of things for me of why this loss to the Raiders is so frustrating. Deshaun Watson played okay. He probably played his best game of the season. But the reality of the situation is he did not clear 200 yards again. This is an offense under Kevin Stefanski that, by the way, they changed for Deshaun Watson, that Joe Flacco threw for 300 or more yards in 5 of the last 6 games that he played. 5 of the last 6 games. Why can't Deshaun Watson do it? The running game non-existent. Yes, there was, Amari Cooper had a really terrible drop where he was hit right in the numbers in between, and it was a beautiful throw from Deshaun Watson, hit him right on the numbers, bounces up into the air, it's an interception, and it leads to what ultimately was the deciding touchdown. Then, the Browns get a touchdown call back on a really, borderline holding call. I'm not going to get mad at the officials because here's the thing, and I'm tired of people making the excuses for Deshaun Watson. He did play better, but I'm not saying that he was by any means amazing. Do we forget that the Baltimore game happened last year? That was a great performance by him. But my whole thing that I keep going back to, and I think I've said this to you, is I judge quarterbacks, and this is why I moved off of Baker Mayfield when I did. How do you perform in the clutch? And Deshaun Watson in multiple situations, yes, I think a lot of last week against the Giants wasn't really his fault. He made some situations up in that situation, but he kind of screwed it up earlier in the game when they should have been up on the Giants. In this situation, they get down the field at the end of the game, down 20-16, after a missed extra point, by the way, by your guy Dustin Hopkins, who I love, by the way, but Dustin's had a kind of a shaky year.
Yeah.
But we get down to the field. It's 4th down and 3. You're in the red zone. Deshaun Watson gets pressure, and I've seen the video of this. He had people open. He could have thrown to, and he just takes a stack. How do you perform in the clutch? And he couldn't come up with a drive there at the end in a game that he should win. I'm tired of people making excuses for this guy. I'm tired of trying to convince myself that this is going to work. It's been 16 games. They're 1-3. Their losses are to the Cowboys, who are a mid team, to the Giants, who are awful, and the Raiders, who are mid to awful. And now they're scheduled. They get Commanders and Eagles back to back. This team is potentially looking at 1-5. And when you have all these expectations and you pay a quarterback that kind of money, you expect more than this. So I'm just tired, Danny. I'm tired of this whole, we've got to make excuses. The offensive line's terrible. We've got to be better. Oh, there was a penalty. I was like, guys, you had an opportunity at the end of the game to win this football game. And Deshaun Watson, with the ball in his right arm, did not throw it. What more can I say here? It's a collective failure from the Browns to be 1-3, but when you pay that guy that kind of money, you are expecting more than 200 yards in any of these 4 games, and he has not been able to do that. So, Danny, if you got a thing here, I'm sorry. I just needed to get that off my chest. I'm really frustrated, and more frustrated than I've been about the Browns than in a lot of their terrible seasons. This is really bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much said it, and I don't really have much more to add. I mean, I texted you at the end of that game, and I was like, "Why is Deshaun holding that ball on 4th down?" I mean, that's just the epitome of what's wrong with Deshaun right now. I mean, I said, if you don't have a receiver open, heave it into the end zone and hope for the best.
Hope for a pass interference. And he had people open. I understand the argument that he had pressure.
Yeah.
in his face, and maybe this was a play call, and like maybe he'll sheepishly call it a decoy again, like he missed a guy on a fourth down late in the Giants game too. But it's just like he's not reading the field, and I'm just tired. And then people are using these excuses. Oh, he had an 80-yard touchdown pass taken off the field. His numbers would have been so better. Guess what? They didn't. They took the touchdown off the board. And part of being in the NFL is you've got to adapt and overcome. Sometimes
Right.
your numbers aren't going to look a certain way. But the reality of the situation is he was fine. He was fine.
Yeah.
But when you are getting paid that kind of money and the organization has invested 6 draft picks in you, all of this money, you want to know why the offensive line and a lot of these picks have been amplified and missed by Andrew Berry? Because they traded all that fucking money. They traded all those picks and gave him all that fucking money. Like this is it's mind-boggling to me that people still want to try and make excuses for this guy. It's been 16 games in 3 years. Like, you expect that. Justin Fields has been in Pittsburgh for 4 fucking games, and I feel better about him in Pittsburgh than I do about Deshaun Watson. Like, what more evidence do you need there that there's clearly an issue? There's clearly an issue.
Deshaun Watson for Devontae Adams. Do it.
I mean, yeah, I would totally sign off on that, because I would be totally fine with your guy Jameis Winston taking over and taking snaps.
Raiders wouldn't do that at this
Oh
point.
no, I know. I joked with you about Trevor Lawrence for Deshaun Watson too, and like Deshaun, like I mean the Jags are 4-0, but the Jags are 0-4. The Jags actually looked okay. They lost at the last second to the Texans. Trevor Lawrence looked fine. I mean, it's just. It's the combination of the fact that he is a creep of a human. He's just not easy to root for at all. Well, in fact, he's impossible to root for.
Impossible.
And then it's just like I'm tired of giving excuses to that guy. So all right, let's talk about something more joyful here, and let me get off my soapbox here. So let's close out the show with a little bit of college football here, because Danny kind of insisted on this, because this is actually really interesting. This is one of the more interesting Heisman races, at least early in the season, because most of the time these things don't shape up until later in the season. But we have seen some really outstanding performances through the first 5 weeks of the season in college football. And really, what it looks like right now is there is a tier of 4 guys above, I would say Dylan Gabriel and maybe a couple of other guys are like a tier below these guys. But the 4 guys that I have in my brain, everybody seems to pinpoint Travis Hunter of Colorado as the leader in the clubhouse, at least for now, because the Buffaloes are 4-1 now, going into a bye. They just had a mammoth, like crazy blowout win over UCF, which was eye-opening for me because I had been down on them. But that makes me feel that Colorado's, maybe more legit than I think. But then we got Jalen Milroe, that insane game against Georgia, which was one of the games of the year. Jalen Milroe's got to be in that discussion too. Some people are throwing Ryan Williams at 17 years old in that, and having 2. By the way, side note. Having 2 freshman wide receivers like him and Jeremiah Smith being this dominant at this early in their career is just fucking insane. So
that 75-yard touchdown was mind-blowing, dude.
Oh, because it was the catch, and then the way that he just danced around to Georgia, because Georgia's a good defense.
Oh yeah.
For him to just dance around those people was just, it's unbelievable. It's wild that kid's 17 years old. That kid's 17 years old. Like it's unbelievable. So you've got Travis Hunter, Jalen Milroe, Cam Ward, whose Heisman candidacy I think got saved because he came to the rescue in that game against Virginia Tech last Friday night. But then also a very, I think it was the right call at the end of that game because like I think it was incomplete before they did that. I'm pretty sure you've seen the video of what transpired in Miami. But Cam Ward, I know Cam Ward from his time at Washington State. He's having a great season there for Mario Cristobal in Miami. I have concerns about how long he's going to be able to keep this up because I just don't trust Mario Cristobal. I know that from covering him at Oregon. He's had reputation. And then this is where it gets really interesting. A guy that you and I are tremendously high on in Ashton Jeanty from Boise State, because this guy, and I talked about him on my West Coast, Best Coast football show. This guy, through 4 games in the college football season, has 845 yards rushing and 13 touchdowns.
Technically 3.5 games.
Three and a
So,
half game, and thank you for clarifying that. He's played 4 games, but he only played a half against Portland State and still had 100 yards rushing. This guy has 845 yards and 13 touchdowns in technically 4 games, but really three and a half.
yeah.
Like, and for those of you wondering, oh, he's running against like nobody teams. This guy has been hit first contact like at the line of scrimmage. And you watch this game. I watched this game against Washington State. There were a couple runs where I'm like, holy shit. And what I hate about this is that Boise State, I think they've got a chance to be a college football playoff team with this new, format. But I think a lot of people are migrating to the first 3 guys that I mentioned because of like, the name brands or like Deion Sanders or like, their college football, like they're up in the top, like, 5 to 10 teams. But Ashton Janty, I just gave you guys the numbers there. That is utterly insane what is transpiring with Boise State's running back. And that was a big time game against Washington State. Washington State was undefeated going into that game. And he ran circles around them. He had 6 touchdowns against Georgia State, and he needed every single one of them. Every single one of them in that game against Georgia Southern to start the season. So,
Yeah.
Danny, I know you wanted to make a point here about Ashton Janty when we had this Heisman discussion. Like I said, all 4 of these guys are very deserving. But as far as I'm concerned right now, it's really for me between Ashton Janty and Travis Hunter right now. Because Travis Hunter has really done some insane things playing both sides of the ball, and I can see why people want to give it to him. And he's probably, I would say, like, on talent, like just because of the way he plays and just how many plays he does, he's got to be considered one of the best players in college football. But then when you look at the numbers and the type of player and how important Ashton Janty has been to a Boise State team that might be able to make history and be a group of 5 team in the college football playoff, it's hard to argue that these two are 1A and 1B. And I would say maybe Janty's a little bit ahead of Travis Hunter.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm 100% riding the Ashton Janty train, and I'm gonna give you a stat that's gonna blow your mind here. So not only does he have 13 touchdowns and 845 yards, he's averaging 10.3 yards per carry.
Yes.
Hold on. This gets crazier. There are 7 quarterbacks averaging more yards per pass than he's averaging per rush. Only 7 in the entire country. I looked it up. I did the research. There are only 7 quarterbacks in the entire country averaging more than 10.3 yards
Wow.
per pass. He is basically putting up quarterback numbers rushing the ball. This is insane. And I literally watched his entire highlight reel from that Washington State game. He got hit at the line of scrimmage like 15 times and still turned every single one of those into a positive play. I've never seen a player like this before in my entire life. He's this weird combination of like Reggie Bush, Ricky Williams, and Derrick Henry all rolled into one. He's like
I was
a
going to throw Adrian Peterson in there too. Like throw Adrian
Peterson's
Peterson. Yeah.
that's a good, yeah. Like he's just like he's got all of their qualities just rolled into one. He is like the most impressive running back I've ever seen in college. I mean, he's literally getting hit at the line of scrimmage and getting 10, 20, 30 yards. Like a couple of his touchdowns have been long runs where he's been hit at the line of scrimmage, broken tackles, and gotten away. Like I've just never seen a player like this before. I'm really impressed with all these players so far. You know, I think for me right now it's between Janty and Jalen Milrow. Milrow's had at least 2 rush touchdowns and 2 pass touchdowns in every single game so far, which is very, very impressive and hard to
Oh
do.
yeah, he.
That's just crazy to me as well. I like this group though. Travis Hunter, you've said it, is just phenomenal. He plays 2 different positions. That has to count for something, and he plays both of them very well, and he's putting up great numbers. To me, Janty is the leader, but like I do think there are some other players that are very close. But I think what's more impressive right now is and more important to watch is honestly if Janty can catch Barry Sanders 37 touchdowns in a season record, which the way he's going, I mean 13 touchdowns in 4 games is pretty impressive. I think he can. I'm going to throw another name into the mix of a player I really really like. A player who's turning into one of my favorite college players right now, who we did not talk about yet. I don't think he's quite in the mix of these guys yet, but I think he is closing in on it, and that's Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. I am absolutely falling in love with him. I don't know how much you've watched of him or LSU so far. He's been phenomenal. He has 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's throwing 70% completions. Um, he's a really good-looking quarterback. His footwork in the pocket is exceptional. It reminds. This is a big big compliment. His footwork reminds me of Peyton Manning. He's
Yeah.
just very, very sensational. He's fun to watch. I would throw him in as a dark horse candidate. I'm going to jump on that bandwagon before you accuse me of being a bandwagon hopper in like 5 or 6 weeks when he's in the mix. So Garrett Nussmeier, remember that name because I think he's going to be in that mix. But ultimately, right now for me, it is a two-man race with Janty and Milrow, and I think Travis Hunter is just on the cusp, and I think Cam Ward's a little bit behind. And then we can throw in Dylan Gabriel and Nussmeier to me are kind of in that mix as well.
I do like the Nussmeier pick, and I obviously that I work on the side at my main job, my day job is at SiriusXM college sports, and I was able to sit in on the SEC radio media day coverage. He is super impressive. Like
Mhm.
it's just his dad's in the business, quarterback coach. Like he's obviously got it, and it doesn't surprise me that you like I said the reigning Heisman Trophy winner went to LSU. And then the one in 2019 went to LSU.
Yep.
So I know those are different coaching staffs, but still, um, LSU. I mean, yeah, the one blemish on their resume this year so far is the USC game, and that
Yes.
was a really good football game. USC.
Yeah.
I'll throw one in for you, and I got to see him in person, and I've also been able to watch most of the games that he's played thus far this year. Miller Moss at USC.
Yeah.
He is, I mean, obviously the natural is like he's replacing Caleb Williams. This guy is tough as shit. Like he was getting destroyed against Michigan last week, or in the loss that they had to Michigan. And then this week against Wisconsin, they're down 21-10 at home, and he comes in and he's just getting beaten to bits. And then he has this crucial fourth down conversion where he does a read option, bounces off a bunch of tackles, and scores a touchdown against Wisconsin, a big moment. They're going to Minnesota this week. That should be a win for them. But then they get Penn State at the Coliseum. And that October 12th, we don't have to go too deep down this college football realm because I know you're a little bit bummed out about Florida State. But October 12th is shaping up to be like one of the days of the year because
Yeah.
there is Oregon and Ohio State are playing, Penn State and USC are playing. There's a couple other games off the top of my head that I can't remember, but Miller Moss, they have the one loss against Michigan, and that was an unfortunate situation where Michigan just ran over USC and was able to pull out that game. But that kid has impressed me so much with his toughness and just his ability, and it's also helped that he's been able to play it, not like Caleb Williams when USC's defense was consistently letting him down last year. It's been nice to see USC's defense step up. So if you're going to throw one in, I would throw Miller Moss into the discussion
Yeah.
too, because naturally, let's get real. If it's not going to be Ashton Janty or Travis Hunter, it's going to be somebody from the SEC or the Big Ten. That's the way. That's really what this is going to come down to. So, Milroe's obviously going to be in there because of the Alabama connection. And listen, while we're at it, Kalen DeBoer is a fucking amazing coach. I think 109. I think it's 109 and 12 as a head coach.
It's insane.
That's insane. That's like I was bummed about the way that he left Washington, but I swear to God, you replace the GOAT with maybe the future GOAT.
Yeah.
Like Kalen DeBoer is on a trajectory right now, and if he could win a championship in year one at Alabama, holy shit, man.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
It's like I'm not surprised that Alabama's off to the start. By the way, that's an all-timer game that happened. It shouldn't have been it shouldn't have been an all-timer game like that, but it was. So
it was fun.
So yeah, we'll be following that situation. Maybe we'll have to do a weekly update because you and I are on the Ashton Janty train. But yeah, I think well, it's ironic that you go with Nussmeier, I go with Miller Moss. They played in the first game of the season, so
kind of ironic.
and so but that's a good pull by you. And this, like I said, this is going to be a really interesting Heisman race because I think it's going to be looked at a little bit differently because of the 12-team playoff. It's granted, last year's winner didn't come from a playoff team, but I think it's going to open up a lot of doors for a lot of different people who are either in contention or not. And specifically for somebody like an Ashton Janty with the group of five getting a guaranteed spot in, that opens the door for a possibility that more people should be watching this guy. Because like you said, man, I watched the runs that he had like that was just an unbelievable performance from him. And the only loss that they have is to a top 10 Oregon team at Oregon, where they lost on the last second field goal.
Yeah.
So if they run the table, man, they're going to go to the playoff because they play
Oh, yeah.
UNLV, and UNLV is probably the biggest roadblock for them, being undefeated and being also a Group of 5 team in their conference. So, yeah, man, we got really fired up on these topics today, man. Like you and I think we're gonna have a short show, and then we just blabber on. This is why we love doing this, man. It's just like it's the time we get FaceTime. We get to yell at each other about sports topics, the things that we cherish the most, and then hey, Danny can dive into some college football, because like Danny, I like that Danny, like, even in spite of the fact that Florida State has been so terrible this year. By the way, DJ Uyunglele is out for some games, so that's going to be good, which is ironic. He's going to miss the game against Clemson, which is very ironic there. But I appreciate that, like, it's good to see that, like, college football, even in the midst of all of these changes, is getting a lot of attention.
Oh, yeah.
And the ratings are showing it too. So should be a fun season, man.
I agree.
Some big games this weekend in week 6 that should be very, very interesting. I don't expect anybody from the Ohio State Buckeyes to actually be in the discussion. It's just a reflection of how deep Ohio State is.
Yeah.
Just how deep they are. Like, I don't think there's anybody in the discussion on Ohio State that I think can approach the 5 or 6 guys that we mentioned. So
yeah.
All right. So yeah, thanks to everybody for tuning in here on the show. Thanks to Danny for being here with me. Thoughts and prayers again to Michael, also Brandon and Andrew for being at the funeral. Obviously, that's an unfortunate situation. Rest in peace to Pete Rose and Dikembe Mutombo, along with Michael. Like I said, this show is dedicated to all of them. Danny, you were awesome. Appreciate you, buddy. And we'll be back again next week, hopefully as a 3-man weave. Because that'll be awesome, and a lot of stuff coming up on the horizon. Like, I just saw basketball. Like, before you know it, basketball season's going to be here. We'll have basketball topics.
NHL's a week away.
Yeah, NHL's a week away. Yeah, it's crazy, man. So we'll talk to you guys real soon. I was going to say follow you, but yeah, go to Danny's Facebook. Go to find Danny on Facebook. Follow me at Off the Mic 28 or OT Mike Sports. We'll be back next week. Talk to you guys soon. Bye bye.